Welcome to the Shiv Nadar Foundation Conversations. I'm Shikhar Malhotra, a trustee of the Shiv Nadar Foundation, board member of HCL Technologies, and CEO of HCL Healthcare. As the world faces unprecedented challenges today amid the COVID-19 outbreak, majority of us are dealing with something that we've never faced in our lifetimes, which is limited or virtually no mobility at all. Therefore, the Shiv Nadar Foundation Conversations has created a platform to bring you inspiring stories from leaders around the world from their own respective fields. In this series, we brought you a Nobel laureate, well-known business executives, award-winning authors, eminent sport personalities, and so far we've hosted many guests, and their sessions have been seen over 17 million times. As all of our own members at the Shiv Nadar Foundation and HCL, the students, faculty, parents, alumni, partners, employees are bracing with the current situation in their homes. We felt that it's imperative that we take some of the most unique voices in today's time directly to them and all of you that have tuned in to watch this live today. We hope that the conversations inspire you and uplift your spirits in this time of isolation. Today, we have with us one of the most respected and influential business executives from the world of sport, Richard Arnold. Richard is a group managing director of Manchester United, the football club with over 1 billion fans and followers from around the world. He's responsible for all the commercial and operational aspects of the club, such as driving revenue and growth, managing profitability, partnerships, sponsorships, brand building, and digital transformation. Richard joined Manchester United over a decade back in 2007. Richard is an experienced business executive who has worked across consulting and technology sectors prior to joining Manchester United. Welcome, Richard. It's a privilege to have you here with us today.
Shikhar, nice to see you.
So, Richard, let me start with the first question. With 36 million fans and growing in India, what are your specific plans for the Indian market, and when can we hope and expect to see the first team make a trip to India?
Well, that's a great question. We don't tend to think in terms of markets as such. As you alluded to in the introduction, we've got 1 billion fans, and they're all part of a big family. Sure. And with a huge and vibrant fan base in India, it's a really, really important part of our family and an important part of the world. It's one we've been working with really closely for a long period of time, particularly with our live screenings of games, which have been phenomenally successful across the country. Coming to India with the first team to play games is a priority for us and one that we've been working on. We'd actually had plans for this summer to come and visit on tour. Obviously, those have had to change with the change in our season timing as a result of the COVID crisis. So that's going to go back on the list, and we're going to make plans for the future. But it's an important part of our planning to bring the first team to that part of the world. Hugely popular with us in terms of that fan base, and hugely well supported with football fans in India.
Thank you for that, Richard. I think somehow we're feeling a bit worse about the COVID situation, knowing that the team was expected to be here, but we're very hopeful that they'll make a trip soon. And how are you doing on the personal front with the family? What are you missing most on nowadays?
We lost a great uncle to the virus, but my immediate family have all been really well. It's actually been, in the context of everything that's happening, spending 3 months. I've got 2 teenage sons. We live on a farm, so actually being at home is pretty unusual for me. I don't think I've been in one country 3 months without flying somewhere else in living memory. So a bit strange, but great to spend time with the family that close, see the boys a little bit more. And
they're getting used to seeing more of you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Richard, you also serve as the chairman of the Manchester United Foundation, and their efforts have been really commendable. We've been following and reading up about it. Can you tell us a little bit about what they've done over the last few months?
It's been an interesting experience in terms of the recognition that the foundation have got for the activities they've taken currently. But what's interesting about it is, working with that foundation all the time, all it's done is shine a light on the fantastic work that the foundation does day in, day out, across Manchester in the most, in the areas most in need, across the UK and then across the world, working with UNICEF and our fan groups. And that's, that stemmed from feeding bodies, feeding minds is the campaign's campaign title. And it's ranged from providing food to food banks, meal packs to NHS nurses. They were working around the clock, finding it very difficult to be able to go and get food themselves. So that's been a tremendous activity. And then equally importantly, working with children in the most deprived communities who may not have access to broadband or the devices that are needed for education. So helping the schools both financially and organisationally with that, and providing activity packs and engagement materials, both online and physically, to kids from those schools. So, really, really important part of our activity. And then most recently liaising with 240 supporters clubs around the world to fundraise and contribute to local charities they've chosen in each of those territories. And that's very, very important for us. Obviously there's what we need to do to help those members of the family that are immediately adjacent to the stadium, but it's important that that we help our fans all around the world who've been affected by this crisis.
Must be very uplifting for everyone.
Yeah, no,
to that help.
It's a tremendous organisation and one I'm very proud to be involved in.
Sure. So, Richard, coming to you, your life before Manchester United, you're a chartered accountant by training. You've had a career in technology, consulting, and now you're at the helm of the biggest sports club in the world. How did you start out, and how did Manchester United happen for you?
History point of view, accountancy was born out of uncertainty. I didn't really know what I wanted to do at 21 years old, and I don't think that's an enormous surprise. It's very rare, I think, at 21 you know anything. And accountancy just gave me an opportunity to see lots of different businesses, gain a qualification, and have transferable skills that allowed you to pick and choose between industry sectors, so you didn't have to decide at that time. Technology, my dad said to me, if you do something you love, you never have to work the rest of your life. You're always doing something you enjoy. I've always enjoyed technology. It's an important part of what I did in my previous two roles, both with Price Waterhouse, advising on companies like Orange, MTN and others. And then moving into the business of providing technology to companies, mobile companies. So the company I work for owned many of the patents for voicemail, SMS. We did the messaging interface for the iPhone. So an important part of what I did. And then finally moving into football, those transferable skills, the business growing, the brand building, and also the use of technology in connecting to people on a very large scale were very important skills in enabling me to move into Manchester United, which has just been, when you talk about jobs that aren't work, I mean, a lot of hours, a lot of travel, a lot of time, but it's just an amazing business to work in, amazing group of people. And, the 13 years have flashed past in terms of the time I've been here.
Fantastic. So, now that you've been in sports management for a long period of time, what is the kind of temperament does one need when working for a sports club like Manchester United? What are the skills required to grow and succeed? Many
of the skills are exactly the same as everywhere else. So if you look at the importance of the work that the HCL team do, some of the critical systems, including our own, the HCL platform connects us to the billion fans around the world. It has to work every day, all day, perfectly, under tremendous scrutiny and tremendous pressure, and faultlessly. And just like the HCL platform, where we've never had an outage, which is incredible for a technology platform. Since the moment it switched on till now, it's run at 100% availability, touch wood. But been a tremendous platform. And some of the things that go into that in terms of the planning, the discipline, the understanding of the standards you're being held to by our fans. Quite rightly, they're the highest standards in the world, and you have to operate at those. And that translates into the personal skills you need. An understanding of the fact that you're working for an organization that's bigger than the individual. And that's obviously true for me, but that was true for Sir Alex, that was true for Cristiano Ronaldo, that was true for David Beckham, Eric Cantona. You know, these greats over time have all understood that Manchester United is more important than any one player, and that's, you know, I think that's a very important personal understanding to have when you work at a club. And then the final piece is that, you know, with over 140 years of history, there's a long list of people who had my job before I did. And, you know, in 140 years' time, someone will stand and look back at the quality of the work I did. But that helps you put in context the decisions you take and making sure that you're taking the right decisions for the long term rather than responding to short-term pressure in the needs of what you're doing.
Sure. So, you know, Richard, you mentioned a few names in there as well. And, you know, this question comes directly from students, and it's something which they're very inquisitive about. It's about presence and leadership. Is it ever daunting to work in the same organization, you know, with people and sit in rooms with people that have larger than life personalities like Sir Alex Ferguson and many others? And, you know, what is the advice that you can give them? How should they assert themselves in the presence of such people? And how do they make their opinions felt?
I think one of the fascinating parts about working with some of the most amazing characters, you know, Sir Bobby Charlton, Sir Alex Ferguson, you know, great former players, great current players, is what you find is that the great people who are great succeeders in life tend not to have huge egos. They have big characters, big personalities, but actually one-on-one, they're usually wonderful people. And you know, Manchester United chooses players on that basis. It chooses players and it develops players on that basis. You know, our academy focuses on great characters make great players. And actually remembering that everybody you're dealing with is a person, you know, whether they're the most revered player of all time or the lady that makes the tea or on reception, they're all people just the same. Yeah. And I think that's an important part of the culture at Manchester United in terms of respect that's shown by the great and good, as well as, you know, those performing, you know, less recognised externally, tasks that are less recognised externally, but just as important. And I think that's the mindset I would suggest people take into meeting when you're meeting people that you have huge respect and awe for. And it's not just, you know, not just footballers, but also some of the business people we come across, you know, presidents of America, president of China, you know, great leaders who are engaged through their love for the club. And it's remembering that, you know, yes, they have tremendous power and responsibility, but they are still just people.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think, you know, you said it right. Organizational culture matters a great deal. It's bigger. The club is bigger than any one individual there.
Yeah.
You know, coming to the intersection of business and football, you know, you're managing the complexity of running a big part of the football club, from sponsorship deals to retail, merchandising, digital licensing, and so on. What is the most exciting, as well as what's the most challenging part of your job?
The most exciting and challenging part of our job is the concept of just how important we are to 1 billion people around the world. You know, 91% of fans never change the team they support. So we've got 1.1 billion people. And if you think about one thing that's constant through your life, and you think, you know, how many jobs you'll have, how often you'll move house, you know, how families evolve, you know, children, partners, all of those things. And then you think, okay, well, there's one thing that people love. 85% of our fans that say that the football team is an important part of their personality and identity. And so that's how 1 billion people feel about us. And the most exciting piece is the technology, and HCL have been incredibly influential in being able to connect day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour, right into the pocket of those people all around the world. And you know, when you start thinking about what 1 billion, I mean, in India, you guys have got this experience, right? Of what 1 billion people feels like. It's a lot of people. But to be able to connect in that way with that passion directly to them, and, you know, the technology and the capability and quality that HCL have brought to us has meant that that has been, you know, a world-changing opportunity for us in terms of, you know, the skill that we have and the platform that we have there with the technology we brought in has meant that we're we're a leader in this field. The percentage of time spent on club apps earlier this year, we were 40% of all time spent on football club apps in the world. One club.
Wow.
And that's big, right?
That is big.
And then just the numbers that we're dealing with and speaking to every month. 300 million individual fans that we're connecting with digitally every month, communicating with, getting feedback from. That, I think that's a tremendous opportunity, but also a tremendous responsibility and challenge, just in terms of the scale, the number of languages, the cultural differences, the time differences. A lot of detail that needs to go into that to make sure it's appropriate all the time, and that we're respectful of that relationship.
Thank you. And for a 142-year-old brand, it's truly quite amazing how the club just keeps bouncing back. It's seen wars, pandemics, economic crashes, and yet it's the most powerful sporting brand in the world. What is it about Manchester United that just keeps it going?
Resilience is a very important characteristic, and it's one of the the core components of the club's DNA. You've talked about those challenges that the club's gone through, and it prides itself on developing talent and hiring talent that has that as part of its DNA. Sir Alex was famously quoted as saying that Manchester United is never beaten; it just sometimes runs out of time. And that's very much the philosophy of a never say die attitude. You saw that in the 1999 Champions League final in terms of the last minute winners, and people referred to Fergie time as that, winning games at the end of the game, because you refuse to lie down, you refuse to be beaten and keep coming back. And that's culture that we have off the pitch as well. People understand the importance of the club that so many people love, that they're a custodian of that, and that there is 142 years of history, and there's that sense of needing to be viewed in the scheme of that as having done a good job as guardian of the club. And that translates into a real sense of purpose for people that work at the club. They are doing something bigger than just their job. They're contributing to something very important, and that makes them very determined to perform to a standard, and also not to be swayed off that path when things are difficult. This is depending how you measure them, the sort of second or third global crisis I've been through whilst at the club, and the credit crunch, when people weren't sure whether banks or money would have meaning the day after tomorrow. Again, was another one of those things where the club came through that, grew stronger, invested in technology, young talent, exciting players, I think that resilience is something that you hear from players, you hear from Sir Alex, you hear from Sir Bobby, you hear from everyone associated with the club, that Manchester United is resilient. We don't give in.
It's really interesting that you say that, because if you ask Shiv Nadar, who's the founder of HCL as well as the Shiv Nadar Foundation, and he's been saying this for many years, that the single most important quality is resilience. And I think it's at the, that word resilience is at the forefront of everything nowadays now.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's really interesting also about Manchester United, that it's a publicly listed company on the New York Stock Exchange, and which is perhaps one of the only big clubs, football clubs, to be publicly listed. How does that change and how you plan and execute business decisions? The
sustainability around Manchester United is incredibly important. You don't get 142 years of phenomenal, successful history by not being sustainable in how you approach things. And our vision of being strong financially off the pitch, enabling us to be strong from a sporting point of view on the pitch, and a virtuous circle that goes with that, is very consistent with the disciplines and focus that you see for listed companies. We take the long-standing success of the club very, very important, very seriously, and it's important that we make the decisions that are right for the long term, as I alluded to previously. And all of those behaviours and that determination to be financially strong, so as we can invest, is just absolutely consistent with the discipline of being listed. Okay.
And for a brand with Manchester United's legacy, how do you balance the traditional with the new? Is it ever a thought that you may alienate some of the old timers with some of the newer things that you introduce at the club?
I think that's a really important aspect to touch on. One of the things that we're actually fortunate about is that Manchester United's history includes a history of innovation. So, Sir Bobby always said that he wants Manchester United to be first to do the most important things. So, that goes back. People talk. We spoke earlier about the team planning to visit India this summer, and in the 1950s, Sir Matt Busby was one of the first managers to take the team on tour in the summer to prepare. They took a steamship to America and stayed there 3 months, and played games, exhibition games there. One of the first clubs to do that. Executive hospitality, again, in the 1950s, Manchester United was one of the first clubs to implement boxes where you had private dining facilities. The same thing with LED. And similarly, the culture of youth, having young players, the idea of having young players, and when the Busby Babes started, or Sir Alex Ferguson with his youth team and that philosophy. Again, that's another innovation that Manchester United had. When Sir Matt Busby did it, it was working men playing in hobnailed leather boots, and the idea that a boy would be able to compete in that. And his adage of if you're good enough, you're old enough. I think was again another innovation. So this wanting to push forward, this wanting to have excellence, wanting to be as good in 140 years as we are, as we have been for the last 140 years, is very, very important. And I think that allows us to continue to innovate and to continue to develop. And equally, we must respect the history that makes this club great, and make sure the actions we take are consistent with its values, and with that, really, really strong DNA that the club has that we've been talking about already.
So innovation and culture right at the heart of Manchester United.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about business. In your time at Manchester United, and perhaps even earlier, how have you seen the business model evolve and change? Have you, how do you ensure that Manchester United is ready for the next, let's say, 10 or 15 years?
Yeah, it's been, an incredibly exciting period to be at the club. But then, you look back, Manchester United was the first team to have a railway station at its ground. It's actually on the Manchester-Liverpool line, which is the first line that was implemented. Stephenson's rocket. And you look at the changes, and when I joined in 2007, Manchester United's always had an enormous broadcast footprint through third-party broadcasters. Whether that's Sky and BT in the UK, NBC in the States, or around the world, and CCTV5 in China. So, but in the past, with that, the people the other side of that TV screen, you weren't in touch with. So, if you remember, certainly 80s, 90s, even into 2000s, you were in touch. You weren't in touch with the person on the other side of that screen. They were engaging with you only through 2 hours live TV. Now, that's not to underestimate 2 hours live TV, right? On 80% of the world's televisions. 1 billion homes around the world have channels that show Manchester United games. And that's massive. And that was, that's what drove through the 90s, early noughties. That's what drove the industry and continues to drive the industry today in terms of just people engaging with the content. And again, you think about it, what's the biggest TV series you've ever seen? So Games of Thrones or Friends. And then you think their audiences are tiny relative to Manchester United. We're averaging 100 million people watching our show every week, 2 hours live, new episodes twice a week, right? No one knows what the script is. No one knows what happens. The next day, the back 2 or 3 pages of every newspaper around the world will cover what happened in the day before's episode. When you think of it if you think about Game of Thrones and how huge that was, or some of the other TV things that they've been over the years. And then you put that in the context of what Manchester United is and the coverage it gets, the engagement it gets, and how that translates. That's massive. But what the change that during my time at the club that's happened is we are now able to engage directly with the fan. And again, HCL have been a vital link in that development of being able to connect across platforms. So what's happening on social versus what's happening on our app versus what's happening on the website, that platform, so that we can see fans the same way across all of these exciting channels. But we're able to get the other side of the TV screen now and interact with people directly, not just while the games are on, but also all through the week. So, you know, you'd be playing a couple of times a week when we're going well in the cups, etc. Those other days when we're connecting on training and what's happening and the press conferences and all of those bits and people are incredibly important in getting that engagement with the fan. And that's a really exciting period. And that's only going to, you know, become more important in future as, you know, people's ability to choose what content they engage with. When you look back to, you know, in the time when I grew up, moving from 3 to 4 TV channels was massive in the UK. You know, we had 4 TV channels. Wow, you know, how will we decide what to watch? And you look at that now, and there's thousands of channels to work out what content you want to engage with. Live sport and Manchester United, we're the biggest team in the biggest league, in the biggest sport in the world. And our TV audiences have grown all the way through that, when most broadcast media are seeing declining audiences. Because, whilst the total media consumption time has gone up, it's actually broken up across lots of different items and different channels. And that's not the case for live sport, and certainly not the case for Manchester United. And but being able to connect with the fans beyond that is an incredible opportunity. It's a massive responsibility, as I said earlier, but it's an incredible opportunity.
And so it's gone from episodic to actually just continuous, and that's an incredible opportunity.
Yeah,
going forward, it's going to keep increasing. Talking about leadership in football, football is unique, and it's so different and also similar in some ways to the business world, in the sense that the results are instant. You know exactly who your competitors are, and you always know where you stand in the race. What are the parallels that you can draw from the world of sport and the world of business?
What happens, and if you use a parallel of on the pitch versus in front of the customer, right? The detail that goes into excellence in terms of discipline, preparation, attending to the tiny fractions of a percentage that make the difference, that make the whole picture amazing, are just as true on the pitch as off it. And I think that's hugely important to understand. If you're in a business and, if you haven't prepared properly to see a client, if you haven't thought what they want, if you haven't attended to the details of their pain and their need, then it's very, very difficult to succeed. In much the same way, if we haven't studied an opposition, if we haven't developed the tactics, understood what's going to happen in a game, we won't succeed. And there's a lot of parallel in terms of that, the discipline and attention to detail that goes into being successful. And that's why HCL have been a fantastic partner for us. The thought that went into building our media platforms, into making sure they can evolve and can connect and can cope with all the different languages and different geographies, and some things writing from one side of the page to the other, right. Some things writing from the top to the bottom, and all of the bits and pieces that have gone into that. It's what happens off the pitch that dictates the success when you're on there, and I think that's the key thing in terms of the similarity between sport and business.
So we recently interviewed Ollie, and he spoke about team cohesion and the culture in order to deliver results. Do you find that the same principles apply on the management side of the game as well?
Absolutely. Goal congruence, and for Ollie, that really does mean goal. For us, I think that's very true. And one of the things we're lucky with in Manchester United is that people do have that sense of higher purpose. But that having been said, the alignment on how we're going to achieve greatness, which is the search for Manchester United, continually striving for greatness. How are we going to achieve that, and how are we all going to make sure we're pulling in the same direction and not got different interpretations of how to move? And that's where and Ollie, huge proponent of this, of making sure that the culture, the mindset, and the focus of what we're trying to achieve is right, and that's just as true off the pitch.
Okay, thank you. with millions of followers, you also get millions of experts. And so, for a person in your position, right, how do you filter out what to listen to and sort of what not to listen to when it comes to running the club?
The first thing is, it's the passion of those beliefs and insights and how people feel. And again, I'll use a family analogy. When I worked in technology, my mum was aware, my career was important, but she wasn't intimately connected in every detail of it, and would be much more interested in how my kids were. And when I got the job at United, she started reading the sports pages and phoning up daily to ask. Right? So, and I think that's a microcosm of what you alluded to in terms of that billion followers around the world who passionately engage with us, have strong views about what should happen. Now, some things are divided, right? Who's the greatest player of all time? You'll get almost as many answers as people you ask. But on lots, there's a really clear identity to Manchester United. People have a very strong view of what Manchester United represents, the history of success, resilience, young, exciting, attacking football, being a leader amongst across the sport, sustainability, engaging, recognizing its roots. All of those bits and pieces are really strongly held views in terms of how everybody who supports Manchester United views us. And actually, those values make it relatively easy to understand what you should be doing. And similarly, the highest standards. Every fan holds Manchester United to the very highest standard. And that translates into a cultural expectation at the club that helps us drive us on to results. And those things, so, whilst if you ever mention in a lift or in a restaurant or when you're out, what you do, you will get a very passionate discussion about football. It's great with fans of the club, although they obviously hold lots of different views about what should or shouldn't be done.
Yeah.
But it's also quite good fun, the response it elicits from fans of opposing teams. So I wouldn't be without that passion and that engagement. It's the heart of what's important for the club.
And I think the investment that Manchester United has made in technology has only made the opinions more valuable, and the fans feel that they've got a shared voice to give to Manchester United. When you think about the impact of technology on the game, how do you use data and analytics to grow your brand and revenue? I'm not talking just on the sports side of things, but do you use a heavy amount of technology to assess your growth markets and essentially business in the 21st century?
I'm an accountant, mathematician, and tech guy by history, so of course the answer's in the data. For me, it's been really important in using the right data the right way to really tune what you're doing. For a long time, we've been the most engaged organization in any sport anywhere in the world, not just in terms of TV audience, but also online. And that's not an accident. And the data that we've been using around exactly what it is that engages fans, exactly in the detail. How long are the clips? How often do they want to receive updates? What language, what tone? Where do they want the image to appear? Which one engages them more? And tuning that. And similarly, that detailed understanding and use of data and technology to understand exactly what does engage people and what disengages them has enabled us to be the most successful organization in terms of digital marketing. Our renewal rate with partners is incredibly high, and HCL formed part of that, having renewed with us twice. And that's because the platforms we use and that ability we use means we can engage not just for our own benefit, but also the benefit of the partners that help us, like HCL, engage the fan in a way that isn't offensive and disruptive, and is up to 200 times more effective than advertising. When you talk about digital advertising or Google and Facebook, those are massive numbers, but actually the engagement percentages they get are tiny, whereas the engagement we get with our content is phenomenal. And that's been incredibly important in driving the success we've had commercially, and that comes from, as you said, technology and data and analysis.
It's coming back to the point about innovation. It just seems that Manchester United as a club are always ahead of the curve. Right, growing up in the 90s, it was almost comical that you first liked Manchester United and then you fell in love with football, right? And so while clubs were becoming big locally, Manchester United was becoming big globally. And now, with the digital transformation and the content that Manchester United has rolled out, they've again pioneered. They've been at the forefront of that, rather. And so, is all of this sort of by luck, or is like success institutionalized? And how is that thinking institutionalized as an organization?
We've already spoken about a lot of the cultural contributors to what drives that. The necessity of the high standards, the expectations from the fans, from the players, from ourselves, the shared purpose and understanding of what's needed, the sense of history, and the fact that you're going to be judged. You have to be successful over a long period of time, and that culture of resilience and hard work that forms part of the DNA. You add all of those things together, and you have to be tirelessly in pursuit, striving for greatness, whether that's on the pitch or off it, striving all the time, trying to be better. And I think that translates into the innovation. The other thing is, the ultimate compliment is we're the team everyone wants to beat commercially. If you ask all of our competitors, whether within football or in other sports, who sets the standard, who do they want to beat, whether it's to get a deal or to engage, or we would be everybody's benchmark. And I think that's the ultimate compliment, is we're the standard that all the other teams measure themselves against.
And so now that the club has got over 1 billion followers, does it ever feel like that you're hitting a saturation point in terms of growth, and you're running out of people on the planet?
The numbers of people we engage with are obviously enormous, but actually that's not the key metric we track against. Okay. We track against the engagement level we achieve, and then a broader fan base. Whilst it's a benefit that's growing, and we've benefited hugely, we've always focused on engaging more deeply with our fans. That dates back to how the club was established as entertainment for the working men of Trafford Industrial Park in Manchester. And to this day, engaging deeply with those fans, a duty to entertain, is a huge part of the history of the club. And so that focus on engaging our fans is something that, I certainly don't feel we're anywhere near the end of that journey. There's huge opportunity. We still haven't taken the first team to India, so that's an example. And that engagement and the work that we need to do on engagement, I think we're only just seeing the baby steps of what's possible in the scale of what Manchester United can achieve. Yes, we've got 1 billion people who support us. Yes, 3 billion a year watching games, hundreds of millions engaging each month. And then you look at what are we actually doing with that? What are we achieving with it? And you just get really excited about what's possible for the future, particularly in the context of the advantage we've achieved with the HCL platform in terms of engaging those fans.
And so, esports is another really rapid way to engage fans, and it's completely exploded. I think the last few months has only catalyzed it further. What are your views on esports? And how do you see Manchester United playing a role there? Are we going to see a Champions League format where fans are going to be playing alongside Pogba?
It's been interesting. Esports is a hugely important part of the engagement mix, particularly for the youth, the demographics of participants, and indeed spectators of esports is actually it's a relatively narrow range. So you do tend to hesitate to use the word grow out of it, but it's a really important part, particularly early teens through to late teens. Incredibly important part of engaging fans alongside games. We've been running programs with Konami, who are a partner, as well as with EA Sports through the Premier League. And in each of those, we're very fortunate to have the highest participation level. Over 300 million people choosing to be Manchester United in the FIFA game on EA. And so, from that point of view, it's incredibly important to be on top of that and understand how to engage people. Going back to Paul Pogba, who's a phenomenal athlete. I still believe that whilst esports are amazing and exciting and an incredible engagement tool, and it's fantastic that when you look at the quality of the games and the realism of the games, how engaging they are. I grew up when Space Invaders and Pac-Man first came out, and I know that that was in the day when you had to go to a local arcade and put money in it to play as well, so you couldn't just play at home. But how engaging those were, and then you look at just the realism of the graphics and the complexity of play that's possible. That's pretty amazing. What's possible, and it is a phenomenal part of engaging teenagers in particular, but it isn't a substitute for the realism and the gladiatorial combat of the athletes on the pitch, in terms of the work that goes into that. And Paul's a phenomenal athlete. 6'4", not an ounce of fat on him. Moves effortlessly, and it's great that people can live that experience through games and see what that's like. But actually seeing him live or on TV screen and watching him play is it's an amazing experience, and one that's great to be part of.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think perhaps we also come from a different generation, so there are a lot of younger people out there that I'm assuming that your average age of fans just reduces every year as the fan base grows.
In the stadium, it remains constant, which is phenomenal, because you got sort of high 90s retention rate of tickets. So you'd expect on average to go up a year. But what we've been able to do is, in terms of ticket holders, is make sure that we recruit people that are young. So whether that's teenagers or early 20s. Similarly, in terms of TV audiences, our youth demographic is phenomenal, particularly through our digital platform. Very, very lucky. Our average fan base is very young compared to every other sport in the world. Certainly, if you compared it to, say, golf or Formula One, you're looking at almost half the average age in terms of where we sit on that. And that's a function of how rapidly we're growing, the fact that our fans are in the youngest and most exciting parts of the world. But when you've got 1 billion people, you do start to trend towards the population as a whole. So also phenomenal female-male split. One of the biggest female fan bases in the world. And it's just a very, very fortunate position to be in.
And I'm assuming half your fans are in Asia.
Half of everybody's in Asia, so right? But
just between two countries.
Phenomenal support. China, Southeast Asia, India, massive support. When we were with Nike, they were also the sponsors of the cricket team, and our jersey outsold the cricket team in India. So national cricket team. So from that point of view, wherever you go, it's an incredibly exciting sensation to feel that there isn't a corner of the world that doesn't have United fans. And from a digital point of view, we know where people come in from, and it's literally every country in the world. And you only need to go on holiday and go and find someone to watch a game, and wherever you are in the world, A, it'll be on, and B, there'll be a crowd of people who'll gather to watch that. And you spoke once earlier on about the inescapability. We were in the middle of some fairly exciting times with players, and I'd been traveling a huge amount, and my wife said, "Listen, we need to spend time as a family." And we went out to the Maldives, to this tiny little place. It's incredible, almost nothing there on the island we were on. Spent time snorkeling with the kids, and it was just an amazing experience. We landed the airport, and then you get a boat to get there, tiny little canoe, and you get there, and the first thing you see is the United game's on, and there's guys in the shirts who are the staff watching. You're thinking about, anywhere in the world, whenever there's a game on, there's people gathered together watching it, and it's an amazing sense of family and togetherness.
Fantastic. So I've just got some personal quick response questions for you. Who is your favorite Manchester United player of all time, excluding the current squad?
A lot of fantastic people, and I'm very privileged to have got to know them all. Our legends and ambassadors, some amazing guys. For me, I really, really like Nemanja Vidic.
Vidic, okay.
He's the first guy I got to know as a person rather than a star, if that makes sense. So I got sat next to him on a plane when we were going on an international tour. I got chatting to him, my first week at joining the club, and then also the kind of resilience, hard work, the discipline, the balance he strikes between humility and confidence, I think is fantastic. Tremendous guy. So he's my personal favorite of our very proud players.
What is your fondest memory at Manchester United in your 13 years?
I mean, there's so many. It's incredibly difficult. Winning the Champions League in Moscow was pretty special. But that was so early on in my tenure. I'd been there less than a year when we did that, and so and then you knew you'd sort of. And this is one of the things with the club. You're working alongside people who've had 20, sometimes 50 or 60 years working for the club. So I spoke earlier on about the receptionist. It's a lady called Kathy Phillips, who was Sir Matt Busby's receptionist and has been here ever since. So
really,
having been in a business, not quite a year, you're still very much a new face at Manchester United. And I think that would be right up there. And then the other one would be, again, the Manchester United shirt. It's the number one selling sports apparel article in the world. And so it takes about 18 months to go from design to sale in terms of the design process, the fan engagement process and launch. And so alongside Champions League is the first, so when we launched the Aeon shirt in Chicago in 2009, I think it was, that was the first shirt that everything on there, I'd been part of the design process. And that was quite a special moment for me as well.
That's a special moment. Yes, absolutely.
That's the way.
So, other than the usual suspects like India and China, what country has surprised you with the Manchester United fan base in terms of engagement, size?
One of the things that is surprising is the consistency of support we get around the world, if that makes sense. So, again, going back to that tiny little atoll somewhere
in the Maldives,
in the Indian Ocean, and then you get there and the game's on and there's a bar full of fans. You see that wherever you go, and it's really special. And there's an instant connection. The first thing you'll get asked when you get in a taxi, if you say you're from the UK, let alone Manchester, is Manchester United. And people will be able to name players and talk about favourite games. Often you won't speak the language, but you'll be able to understand the names they're saying and the years and the competition. So I think that it's the consistency of passion and support that is the surprising piece rather than one geography or another.
Couldn't agree more. Richard, do you have a message for our students who are stuck at home, other than football is back? Any words of inspiration that you could leave them with? As
we're emerging out of what's been an incredibly difficult period, the future's yours if you're young, by definition. And I think, displaying those values that critical to Manchester United, hard work, resilience, the refusal to lose, setting yourself the highest standard. If you do that and have the passion to enjoy every moment along the way, whatever happens, you can't lose.
Oh, I like that. Whatever happens, you cannot lose. Well, thank you, Richard. This has been truly inspiring and an interesting conversation. The takeaways are tremendous about resilience and passion, culture. You know, those are ones that we won't forget. Some great learnings. It's been a real privilege to host you on the Shiv Nadar Foundation Conversations. I want to remind all the viewers that the conversation will continue to be available on the Shiv Nadar Foundation's Facebook page in case you would like to come back to this another time. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.